We have an excellent interview this week with Coach Brian McCulloch, who's going to help us reset our seasons and plan for 2021. From metrics to the mental aspect, we cover a bunch of stuff. We even float an idea of doing an entire episode, Fatty, on sleep.
Yeah, sleep matters, and it's just one of the pillars of any great training plan, which is why we have Floyd's of Leadville alongside us. Floyd Landis has based about 90% of his business around rest and recovery. From balms to gel caps to the tincture, Floyd's is about getting you bounced back from the most recent effort and ready for the next one.
High-quality CBD is the Floyd's secret sauce, and you'll find it in all of Floyd's products. When I've done a hard day in the saddle, I almost always have a hard time settling down. Floyd's is my answer. Some CBD drops of full spectrum capsules take the edge off and allow me to get the rest I need so I can make the most out of that day's training.
Yeah, it is a real multi-part process to achieve gains. You got to do the work, you've got to fuel properly, and you need to get the rest that you need. For help on that last part, try Floyd's of Leadville CBD rest and recovery products. Head over to floydsofleadville.com and use the code FATTY at checkout for a 15% discount.
And thanks, Floyd's of Leadville, for sponsoring the show.
3, 2,
1. Leadville, the podcast for the 100-mile mountain bike race presented by Floyd's of Leadville. It's season 3, episode 21 of the show that breaks down, builds up, gets you ready, and freaks you out for the highest and hardest one-day mountain bike race in the country. I'm Michael Houghton, hottie to most.
And I'm Eldon Nelson, but please feel free to call me Fatty. Since we most recently recorded, the Leadville Race Series has had to cancel another event. This time it was the Barn Burner, this amazing qualifier held in September just north of Flagstaff, Arizona. And this is a big disappointment to racers who support the Leadville 100 and other races put on by the series, but it kind of goes along with what's been happening in the spring. I don't think too many of us are surprised. It's, a disappointment after disappointment has made it hard to train, especially train with purpose and intensity when it seems like there's nothing to keep your eye on, nothing on the horizon you're working for.
Which is one reason why we invited our guest on this show. Brian McCulloch is a pro bike racer. Mostly he's a road racer, but he's also a coach. And Brian can do what any coach does. He can assess an athlete's fitness, identify goals, put together a plan. But the one special thing that Brian brings to the plate or the table is this infectious enthusiasm. Brian has boatloads of energy, and boy, do we need that right now. So get ready for some training, focus, reload, and a couple of good stories to boot. All right, confession time here, Fatty. I'm a bit of a hoarder when it comes to bike product. Like, I hang on to old stuff out of the just-in-case mentality. Maybe I'll hang on to that 7-speed cassette just in case that drivetrain makes a comeback. That kind of thinking, ridiculous. Yes, but, it's also harmless for the most part. The one area where I need to rid this habit, though, is with helmets. There is no good reason to hold on to an old helmet.
I do the same thing, Hottie. I as you said that, I was thinking, okay, how many helmets do I have sitting on a shelf in the garage alongside of my 20 pair of shoes I don't wear? But there's a recent newsletter from our friends at Shimano, and they talk about when you ought to replace a helmet. And Shimano has a partnership with Laser Helmets, and that is why this info was in the newsletter. The obvious time to replace a helmet is, of course, after a crash. The helmet has done its job, time to get rid of it.
But Laser says due to their exposure to UV light, helmets eventually need to be replaced. Mm-hmm. Some of the signs of this wear are the outer shell is cracked or separating from the helmet foam. The helmet foam becomes dented or deformed. Helmet straps start fraying. The buckler fit system is cracked. The fit system no longer is fixed to the helmet shell itself. On MIPS-equipped helmets, you want to look out for any tabs holding the MIPS system that are no longer fixed to the helmet shell. All these are signs that it's time to replace your helmet. I always heard that a helmet had a shelf life of about 2 years, and that's right in the middle of Laser's recommendations of replacing head protection every year to 3 years, depending on use.
Yeah. My go-to recommendation is when you can no longer wash the stink off a helmet. That's when it's time to replace it. My personal stink sort of soaks into the foam, and after a while, hosing it down just doesn't do the job. I don't think that was in the newsletter, but
No, it wasn't.
You can make sure that you can learn actual useful information by checking out Shimano's performance enhancing components at bike.shimano.com. And for a new helmet, and it's probably time for a new helmet for most of us, it's lasersport.us. That's lasersport.us.
As regular cyclists, that is, we are pretty used to the clothing situation, right? The bizarre clothing. But have you ever stopped to think how non-cyclists see us?
I do. I think about that from time to time. I can only imagine what goes through their minds. They're thinking, look at them and their tight shorts and multicolored shirts and all those logos and those shoes that make us walk funny and fall down when we're on smooth concrete in a convenience store. It just doesn't look right, and it doesn't look comfortable to them.
And for the people just getting into cycling, putting on these bizarre outfits can be intimidating, especially if you are like most of us and don't have the body of a Pro Tour rider. These tight-fitting clothes can be, how should we say, revealing?
Which is why it's great to have DNA Cycling as a go-to for bike clothing. They have all kinds of different cuts, especially for jerseys. They have everything from a super aero cut that is skin tight to an adventure cut with a loose, relaxed fit.
And then there are the size runs that DNA has. I can't think of another clothing company, Fatty, that covers 10 different sizes from XXS to 5XL. That's incredible. From personal experience, I can tell you that I size down for the tops, the DNA tops, and bottoms, they're usually my normal sizing.
Yeah, and you're a little bit trimmer than I am, so I always actually order true to size on both jerseys and bibs. Anyway, DNA is offering a 10% discount to our listeners if you want to put together your own kit and with your own logo. Just go to dnacycling.com and in the custom apparel inquiry page, choose other in where did you hear about us, and then type Leadville Podcast.
Like we said, Coach Brian McCulloch is our guest. He is a pro on the road with a domestic team. He and his wife, Joy, also run a coaching business called Big Wheel Coaching. And Brian is also part of the Training Peaks network of coaches. He has coached about a dozen Leadville racers, and tons of the off-road endurance riders, too, have sought his services. While crits and road races are Brian's main thing, his biggest win came at one of the most well-known mixed surface events anywhere, and that was the 2018 Belgian Waffle Ride. I met Brian years before any of that. Like a lot of cycling relationships, we met on the bike in a moment of opportunity. All right, Fatty, as we said, our guest today is Brian McCulloch. And Fatty, you're going to have to stand by for a minute here as Brian and I go over what was some great history, some absolute fabulous bicycle riding on the road. I can't even remember how long ago it was, Brian, but we were both Cat 3s. And this is how Brian and I met, Fatty. We met in a road race, in a breakaway. And I'll have to say, this was one of the better days in road racing history. I think I got away, Brian, from the main pack in the road race. And this was up at, what's the name of that course up there, Brian? Oh,
Sisquoc.
Sisquoc, that's right, which is near a town in Santa Maria in Santa Barbara County. And I'd gotten away with a couple of other guys, and I turned around and looked back, and I saw a figure coming up towards us. And that person was Brian McCulloch, our guest today. And Brian got in our break with us, and he, Fatty, was the absolute cheerleader of this break. I mean, it's no wonder, Brian, you became a coach, because you not only drove the break with your legs, but with your enthusiasm. It was pretty cool, Fatty. He was motivating us the whole way through, and it came down there to Brian, as I recall, the last lap, and we had two others with us, and those guys were hanging on pretty good. And I went back to those two fellas and I said, look, guys, You're not sprinting for this finish because Brian and I have been doing all the work. We've been doing all the work in this breakaway here. And they said, fine. Just don't drop us. We're just here for third and fourth.
We're here for points, yeah.
Okay. We're just here for points. That was it. And so I gave it my best there at Sisquoc trying to drop Brian, but to no avail. He left me with, I don't know, Brian, must have been a couple miles to go. You left me and took first, and I took second. And since then, we've kind of known each other, haven't we?
Oh, I would say so, sir. You are, Hadi, you're a legend, man. I remember standing on the podium, and I believe I might even still have the pump that we won. I think you got a large T-shirt or probably a triple XL T-shirt of some kind, and I think I got a Surface, like it was this just god awful rusty color thing, and I don't believe it even worked. But I remember you and I having a conversation after the race, being like, well, that was a hell of a lot of work for a T-shirt that doesn't fit, but it was just, what a special experience, because that really is a classic race in Southern California. And it's a really, really tough course because it's windy and lumpy and hilly, and the pavement is really challenging in some areas. And although it is something where breakaways often go there, it's more like, it's usually a race of attrition, and you were aggressive early. And man, that's just how I love to race. I was like, oh, Hadi's going for it. I didn't know you then, but I was like, dude, look, if this guy's getting after it, like, well, let's give him a hand. Let's make this happen.
Yeah, I couldn't even find our results, Brian. I think it was 2008 or something like that. I can't even remember how far back it was.
Before the internet.
Yeah, before it was. That's how old the results are. And that year, you and I both finished very high in the SoCal Cup. Now, you went on to greater things on the road. Brian eventually became a pro, Fatty, with the KHS Elevate Pro team. And now they're the Webaplex Elevate team. Do I have that name correct, Brian?
Yeah, it's just transposed. We started as the Cash Call mortgage racing team, and then it became the KHS racing team. And then from there, it became Elevate from there it became Elevate KHS, and then it became Elevate Webaplex. So I was actually the first guy to sign when the team went pro, and I've been here all 10 years. So obviously this year's a little bit of a toss up, but I'm at 38, I'm thankful to be able to tell you guys, like, I've been grinding on this gig for a long time, and I really enjoy it.
So what is your role on now? When I first met you on the road, you were a guy that could go on the breakaway, could animate a race, could finish off a sprint. What was your role? What has been your role as a pro on the road?
A lot like what you described in the breakaway scenario there, where it's just motivating. Cycling is an interesting sport because we have so many guys that patience is a thing in our sport, and it's definitely a virtue, no doubt. But a lot of the young kids that are racing at the high level, they're waiting, and then the opportunity passes them by, right? So they need people, or they need guys that are like, no, the opportunity is now. Like, we have to do work to put our opponents on the back foot. And so that was always been, for lack of a better term, I've been a domestique, but I've always gone in breakaways, helped with lead outs, get the guys to the climb, even do a little bit of climbing, very little, but because when obviously as the team has grown over the years, the stature of guys, grew. And so we had James Piccoli was my roommate. When he joined the team, he came to the team. I picked him up from the airport for our very first training camp before the tour of Utah, and we've been roommates ever since. And he just, moved on to Israel Startup Nation this year and just raced Il Lombardia and was in the breakaway. So, I'd like to believe that some of my breakaway discussions with him have paid off for him when he's raced a world tour. But anyway, yeah, we've kind of done it all there, but mostly it's just been, man, I like to go fast. I like to be at the front. I like to be at the sharp end, the tip of the spear. So that's kind of always been my job. Never really a closer, but my goal has always been to be a part of the winningest team in America. And I'm proud to say that I've been doing that for quite a while.
Yeah, then as a domestic pro, now predominantly what you folks are doing are some road races and a lot of criteriums. But in 2018, you turned this idea of a road pro into the champion of the Belgian waffle ride. I mean, it seems like a huge leap. So tell me about BWR. How did you get into BWR? How did you make that leap? And then how did you win it?
Yeah, Heidi, it's a great question, but it's really not that much of a stretch. If I'll just fill in the gaps for you and Fatty. But essentially, what prior to racing bicycles, I raced motorcycles professionally as a AMA pro motocross and supercross rider. I was never very good, but I was what they would call a privateer. So I was a 3-digit guy. And so for anyone who's listening has any motorcycle experience, like they back in the days when James Stewart was just coming up. I was in the same races as him, and he was lapping me in qualifiers. So I was never very good, but I was certainly tenacious and maybe too dumb to quit. But so I've always ridden off road. Coincidentally, never really owned a mountain bike. But so a dear friend of mine who was one of my groomsmen and also just a coach of mine. I think he coached me for like 10 years. Well, certainly when you and I were racing together, Neil Shirley was coaching me, and he's like a godfather of gravel. And so he kind of did this first gravel event called the what was it? It was Gravel Palooza up in Santa Clarita. And so I went and did that. And so then he was always telling me about the Belgian waffle ride. And coincidentally, at the time, I was coaching guys that were doing the Belgian waffle ride. So I trained them for it. And they were just, raving about this event. So in 2017, I didn't get selected for our Tour of the Gila team. And I had a chip on my shoulder for it because I was like, man, I was riding really good. And, climbing is tough, right? And I get it. We were going to win the climbing days, and that's not where you really need a domestique for. So I had a little chip on my shoulder there. And that weekend was the Belgian waffle ride in 2017. So I called up Phil Tinsman and Michael Marks, and they were like, please come. We'd love to have you. Let's see how it works out. And I had never experienced anything like that before. And I can tell you guys, like, the reason I'm still, here 10 years as a pro and long time before that racing, the reason I still do it is because of the people. It's the people that I get to meet, the people that you meet through cycling, I think are just some of the just most wonderful people. And, MMX, Michael Marks, who runs that event, he was just super, super good to me. All the people there, I had known from my time racing, and they were just out for a hardcore ride. And I ended up at the front. I think I got like 10th that year, but I crashed at like mile 90 and I broke my hand and got a pretty bad concussion. But I was just such a knucklehead because it was like, everyone was like, hey, ride a gravel bike or, get tubeless or do all this stuff. And I was like, as a road pro, you don't have access to any of that stuff. We just didn't. And so I was riding tubes and 50 millimeter clinchers and just rim brakes and just getting after it, And so we went down this descent of Black Canyon, and I crashed pretty hard, broke my hand pretty good. But so there's some great pictures. You guys should look them up, where I was like, basically, I'd ripped my jersey. I'm literally like, my jersey is blue from the Elevate team, and then it was all red on one side because it was just all jacked up. And so I rode the last 40 miles, and I rode myself back up into 10th and won the King of the Dirt jersey, or King of the Mountain jersey that year at the race, and was like, I was just hooked ever since. I was just hooked. I was just thinking about it all 2018, thinking about it, and just, I love training big, doing big rides. And so I trained. Wouldn't say that I trained specifically for it, but that year I told our team manager that I didn't want to go to the Tour of Gila. I wanted to go to the Belgian waffle ride instead. And he was like, are you sure you want to do that? I said, oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And then, we just showed up. My wife was like 7 months pregnant, I think, at the time. And we didn't really know what was going on or what to expect. I just knew I wanted to put in a good ride, and through quite a funny story, which we can get into, I ended up winning it. But I didn't know I was going to win it, even though I was off the front solo for about an hour and a half. I didn't realize I was leading. So we can get into that. But it was a pretty funny story, actually.
Yeah, I want to ask, so many questions from what you've already said, but I really want to dig into the coaching as well. But before we get into the coaching part, one of the things that you have demonstrated with Hadi is the ability to pull a group together and get the most out of them in a race. And it doesn't matter that they are not from the same team. And that's one of the big parts of doing well in the Leadville 100 as well. Most of us don't have a team. We're individuals who are just, scrambling to do, to try to put a group together if we can to get a little bit of extra performance out of, and a little bit of less time in the wind. do you have tips for citizen racers who, the rest of us aren't pros and the people we're riding with aren't pros? How do you put a group together and get them to really hang together and perform well together in a pace line, whether on dirt or on pavement?
Fatty, I love that question because I think that's one of the most useful things that our listeners can gain from our time together, because it's commonality and finding common ground is really, really important. Okay. And Benjamin Franklin is famous for saying, and I'm going to mess up the quote, but essentially he says, if you're the new neighbor in town, you don't wait for your neighbors to bring you apple pie and a welcome gift. You go ask your neighbors for help. And what that creates is a symbiosis between the two of you, because once I move into the neighborhood, I say, hey, Fatty, can you help me unload this sofa? You say that, well, then you're much more likely to ask me for help in return. And we get to create a relationship from that. So it's so simple when we think of it like that, but it really translates fantastically into our bike riding, because what we need to do is we need to ask for help a lot of times, and we need to be willing to give help. Okay. So I always like to find symbiosis in what we're doing. And I also like to be, because bike riding, you earn your reputation, right? Because, we've done a lot of racing in Asia, and where I'm the only guy that speaks English. How do you get 6 guys in a breakaway to work together when I'm the one guy who speaks English and I look different than everybody else here? Right. Well, the thing is, you have to lead by example, and your actions predicate what you're going to do. Right. So I always try to be the first one that's going to pull, but I don't pull hard. I pull at a pace where everyone can get some rest, and then I ask for help. Okay. And so I think I try to bring that to our athletes as well, so that they can help everyone feel like they're a part of a team. Even if the alliance is temporary, it's totally okay. Just because we're not going to be together all day, maybe you're going to go on, Fatty, because you're just a better climber than me and I have to ride within myself. That's okay. But while we're here for the next 30 minutes, we have some commonality. Let's help each other. So I always try to tell my athletes, like, hey, there's 4 of us. I should do 1/4 of the work. Right. So how do we do that? It's like, hey, guys, there's 4 of us. Like, let's rotate. Right. And what tends to happen, and again, I know most people listening to this are coming predominantly from an endurance mountain biking background, but I think everybody these days has a lot of different bikes. Maybe it's gravel, maybe it's road, and they do a little bit of training with each. But the thing when you're doing on a road bike is, if you just remember that stronger riders pull longer, not harder, just that one little nuance can make such a big difference for everyone. Because what happens is stronger riders love to just go out there and they just lay down the hammer. And what does that do? That creates resistance with everybody, right? They're just like, well, I don't want to pull because I don't want to get dropped. Whereas if I'm a stronger rider, if I just take a longer pull, I'm starting to build trust with you. And then you can say, okay, hey, Brian, like, I'll take a pull if you're not going to attack, or we can at least have that conversation. So I think communication is really, really important for us at whatever level we're doing. Obviously, I'm talking predominantly about road riding, but there's so many times in Leadville or at big gravel events where, like, if you could just have 20 minutes of someone to rotate with, you would half the amount of work you would do, and your speed would pick up 2 miles an hour. Boy, that sounds like a deal. If you're a gambling person, like, tell me that doesn't sound great, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you've just earned your keep, Brian. That's simple and memorable. Take a pull, make it. Don't blow up the group, and don't take such a long pull that other people don't feel like they have to be part of the group. So fantastic advice. And there's enough in Leadville where, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Conservatively, that knowing how to work a pace line can make a difference.
Oh, more than that, right? I mean, that is such a challenging course. If you just think in total duration, we don't have to necessarily think in miles, but if we just think, if people are doing a 10-hour Leadville or an 11-hour Leadville or whatever the number is, right? If you think of the time that they're solo, imagine if you could just make a quarter of that with somebody. Like, it just makes such an incredible difference, right? And so in these ultra endurance events, I can't stress it enough. You want to find commonality. And we try to do that really. We do this a lot actually in our coaching business, where it's like, I'm always connecting our guys that are going to the same events. and I say guys loosely because we coach men and women, but we're always coaching our athletes. I always try to get them like, hey, I know such and such, and I know such and such from when we raced together. I mean, I would do this with Hottie too. And I'd be like, hey, I know Hottie's going to be at that event. You go talk to him. Like, that dude will help you. Right. And then that's how we build trust and rapport with each other, because we can build our little, shall we say, our little team. I always think of a breakaway like a nucleus, right? It only takes 2 cells and then you can start building something really special, right? So if like, okay, I just have Hottie, or if I just have Fatty, and then, okay, it's just me and Hottie are working together smoothly, Fatty's he's going to figure it out. He's going to either look at what we're doing and just join in, or he's going to be like, I don't want to be, odd man out here. I want to get in on this. Now we have 3 people. So I'm always trying to think of it as like every person makes it easier for me to do the work and us to go faster and us to have more fun. Because at the end of the day, we just want to go. Who doesn't want to like going faster? I mean, if you're listening to this podcast, I know you like to go fast. I like to go fast. I like to go fast on road. I like to go fast off road. I just want to go fast, So like, hey, if I can do it with a buddy, it just makes it better.
Well, Brian, in addition to becoming a pro, like you said, you also became a coach, and you and your wife, Joy, who, by the way, I don't throw her on superlatives very easily, but Joy has got to be one of the nicest persons I have ever met in cycling. Nicest person, period, but absolute tremendous person. That coaching business that you and Joy run is called Big Wheel Coaching. Very cool name. Very cool logo, by the way. It is a big wheel, folks. They have the big wheel as their logo. The big wheel you probably remember from your childhood days. You're also a coach with Training Peaks, so you can find Brian either via Training Peaks or Big Wheel Coaching, where he and his wife run a great coaching business. So let's get into the coaching side of things, because that's why Brian is on the show. We want to get racers either prepared for whatever event they might still have on this current calendar, or what's coming down in the future. And first of all, Brian, imagine a question you've been getting a lot of, or maybe not, but I imagine these days is, hey, coach, how's my immunity? Like, should I be worried about my immunity, considering this worldwide virus is going around? Now, you don't have to talk about COVID-19 or anything with us, Brian, but what about immunity and folks who train a lot? Is it true that we're more susceptible to illnesses and so forth? And should we be more careful than the rest?
I think it's smart to be I think it's smart to be calculated about what you're doing. There's no doubt about it, Hadi. You're absolutely right. We should question what's going on with our immunity, but I also think that we can also be realistic. The majority of the people that I work with, and I don't want to overgeneralize, but the people that we work with are training 12 or less hours a week. Okay. And so their immunity isn't compromised by a massive training load. Okay. As a pro, there's been times when I've been doing multiple 30-hour weeks. Yeah. It's like you get around somebody that has the sniffles, 100% it goes through the whole team and everybody's got the sniffles. But that doesn't mean that compromised immunity is limited to people that are just, doing 20 plus, 30 plus hour weeks. But what I would say is if our athletes and everyone listening are handling the fundamentals, what does that mean, the fundamentals? I want to make sure you're getting quality sleep, okay? Everyone knows, there's probably been so many great podcasts I'm sure that you guys have done about sleep, but just getting to bed early is always better than staying up late and sleeping in, right? And so there's lots of great apps out there for quality sleep. If we can make sure that the quality of sleep is good and we can make sure the hydration nutrition component is good, it's almost, you can handle the training load. So if your basics and your fundamentals, if you're sleeping good, you're relatively stress-free, and you're doing the things, washing your hands, wearing masks, doing all the stuff, you can handle a lot of intensity. And we coach a lot of people that are maybe spending a lot of time on Zwift because, hey, life is busy, right? Or maybe they're just doing more training volume than ever because now they're working from home. So the commute has been ixed from their weekly schedule. So now they've found themselves with an extra 2-3 hours a week to train. Those people still aren't at their limit, which it's affecting their immunity. With that said, I really think that the biggest thing about immunity is the nutrition component, and I really try to subscribe to the food is medicine kind of idea. And so by eating well, you're making sure that everything is kind of top notch. And I'm not an epidemiologist, but it's good food in, good results out in my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And with with sleep, I think in particular, that is a incredibly important piece. And when a couple of years ago, I was super fortunate to have Jonathan Vaughters actually coach me through a season. And it was amazing. It was a nice piece of luck. The single most, repeated thing he said to me was, get more sleep, get more sleep, get more sleep. If you can take a nap during the day, it's the sleep component is an incredibly underemphasized aspect of training, immunity, everything. Howdy, we got to do a sleep episode at some point. That's important.
I'll sleep to that. Yeah, I will sleep through the whole episode if that's what you want. An hour of me sleeping, that's good with me.
That would be relaxing. More questions for you if we can, Brian. This has, of course, been such a weird year with, there was no Leadville 100 for 2020. There is a good chance that a lot of our listeners won't even get into the 2021 race because of, a lot of lottery issues. A lot of our listeners are, have a big question mark. Are they going to be racing 2021, 2022, or maybe even 2023? With that question mark and a lot of hopefulness, probably from a lot of people, what can our listeners, racers, and people who are training start doing with almost exactly a year to start getting ready for whenever it is that they're going to get a chance to toe the starting line?
That's a fantastic question. I think we can go at any number of ways at it because everybody's at a different level starting place. So, but I think where everyone, at least what I've seen from cyclists and something that I try to do and spend a lot of time with our athletes doing is really going deep into some goal setting. Because I like to use the SWOT analysis. If you guys are familiar with business, they do a SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And so I always like to do an athlete SWOT analysis with my guys and gals, of course. But the idea is that we really just let's do both a goal setting component. What do we want to achieve? Right? What is that roadmap going to look like? Because some of that will take care of itself. Most of the people I've been working with continuously. So we kind of know where we're going because at least we were on the way there. And then, COVID comes and now we hit pause. Right? So we have a general idea, but this particular time in COVID, I think, is a really powerful time to look at ourselves from that business and organizational standpoint and say, hey, what are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? What opportunities lie in front of us and what threats lie in front of us? Okay. So a simple threat that you just said right there is like, well, I don't know if I'm going to get in it for 21 or if I'm going to get in for 22 or 23. I don't know. So that's a little bit of a wild card. But as far as opportunity goes, I look around and I see a tremendous amount of opportunity right now. I see a lot of opportunity because people are now not commuting. Okay, people are now not distracted. What tends to happen for our athletes, and I've coached people beyond our region. I've coached people across the world in Australia, Bermuda, Singapore, UK, Dubai, all these places, right? And there's a pattern that emerges with everybody, and it's like whenever the weather is right, group rides happen. And group rides then everyone loves the social element of cycling, which I, as a cyclist, love myself. Okay. But part of choosing to be a part of a group ride is that I'm relinquishing control of whatever workout I think I might need or my coach has directed me to do. Right. And I think it's important that people recognize, like, if you're going to be a part of a group, you have to let go of those things. You can't be the guy that comes on the ride and is like, I'm just going to do my intervals now, because then you just look like a jackwagon. Don't do that. So what I would say is now is a great time to look at the opportunity because there's no distractions. What are those distractions that you have in your life that have kind of derailed things before, right? And I'm not necessarily suggesting, or I don't want to imply that everyone has nothing to focus on but cycling. I get it that people have kids and kids are just trying to figure out how to grapple with school right now and in virtual world and how does that happen, but still play outside and all those things. But the reality is there's a lot of opportunity right now because if people aren't commuting, maybe they can do some longer rides. Something that I think is a particularly unique opportunity for people doing like Leadville type events is, well, now you can do a longer ride on one day, whereas before, because we had to cram all that training into the weekend. It was like, you were trying to do like a 4-hour Saturday, back it up with a 4-hour Sunday, then get some rest in during the week, this, that, the other. Well, now that you're working from home and you're not carrying as much stress in your training load from work and all the other things going on, it makes it much easier to be like, hey, Saturday, go on and do 5.5 hours. Sunday, make it a 2-hour, get up early, go do 2 hours, and then Sunday's your family day after that. And so many of our athletes have just been loving that because it helps them prep for what is a stressful and crazy world that we're living in now. So I think the cool thing is there's opportunity here because it's allowed us to be more creative with how we structure the weeks. Whereas when you have a 60-hour work week plus travel back and forth to work, or even travel across the country in planes, because a lot of our athletes do that same thing. I know people listening were traveling all over for business to do those things, and it makes it very limited because you're going from, oh man, I've got to work out in a hotel gym 2 days a week this week and then try and cram all my riding into the weekend. Now you maybe have 5 days to ride. Like there's a lot of things you can do with that. You can turn a lot of, when we go back to the SWOT analysis, it's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I challenge your listeners to stop thinking about weaknesses as something I'm not good at. Maybe that's an undeveloped strength. Maybe a weakness is just an undeveloped strength and you just maybe you could be really good at endurance. Maybe right now you're just really strong at 5-minute power or short, punchy climbs. Maybe you can be good at the long grinders, okay? But you just got to work on it. Well, now's the time. Here's the opportunity. So I really encourage everyone to start looking at themselves, or I would say the first thing to do is take that SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, add the athlete element into it. Then we can look at, okay, where are we going? What's our goal? What do we want to achieve? And then backwork it.
I love what Brian said to us, Fatty, regarding health. Good food in, good results out. Coming up, though, Brian resets our training and he finishes up his story from the Belgian waffle ride. But for now, Fatty, I'm going to keep repeating that mantra. Good food in, good results out.
That is a good mantra. And while you do that, I am going to talk about the feed, which is where you should be going if you want to get more good food, Hottie.
Oh, yeah. The feed. That's a good one.
Oh, yeah. Last show, when we talked about Lisa's and my DIY Leadville 100, I told you that I survived the day on Martins. Having Martins along for the ride with those calories in my bottles and in my jersey pockets meant less to carry as far as solid foods. And that was great because it was a long day with a lot of up and a lot of down. And as a refresher, here's what I had mixed up on the day. I had Martin energy gels and the 160 drink mix, which is all available from our friends at the feed. Just, 1.5 liters in my USWE pack with Martin 160s mixed in, and then enough gels to take every half hour. 3 regular Martin gels for every 1 Martin caffeinated. Super easy plan, made it easy for me to get around 300 calories per hour. While I had a rough day, I never bonked.
If you have yet to try Martin and don't know what to get, then maybe we suggest a Martin mix box. In it, you get 6 each of the Martin gels, 6 with caffeine, 6 without. You get 6 pouches of the 160 drink mix like Fatty uses, and 3 of the 320 calorie sachets. I actually like those. It's a cool idea for racers new to Martin. You can just try it all and kind of figure it out. And as part of the box, by the way, there's a Martin water bottle with a fill line, so you get that water to Martin mix ratio spot on.
Oh, I like the word sachet. It's a good word. So Martin is just one of many, probably hundreds, great products at the feed. Go to thefeed.com/Leadville and sign up to get a 15% discount. It's making a great product, a great and affordable product.
We've talked a great deal about the great components Envy has. But this time, instead of talking about what Envy has, we want to talk about what Envy recently did. It was something born out of their pure love for the bike and small builders.
Yeah, this actually started last year when Envy hosted a small builders get-together about an hour's drive from where I live. It's at their HQ in Ogden, Utah. And this year, of course, with the pandemic in full bloom, hosting an in-person event certainly wasn't in the plans. But Envy, not deterred. They put on their Builders Roundup event by hosting the bikes, just not the people. And over 2 days, they sent out virtual tours and photo galleries of just magnificent builds.
23 bikes in all from mostly small, mostly custom builders. This was eye candy at its finest.
Yeah.
There were 2 bikes in particular, Fatty, that caught my eye. So if you're taking notes here and putting together a Christmas list, both shared the same characteristic, a curved top tube. I really love the Sklar All-Road Titanium, built in Bozeman, Montana. It is a slightly curved top tube, just enough to distinguish it from other designs. The bike that caught my eye was, another one that caught my eye, I should say, was the Retrotrek Funduro. This, Fatty, is right in your wheelhouse. A single-speed steel trail bike built to take either Envy's new Mountain Fork or a Fox 120. Curtis Inglis is the builder, and his signature is a curved top tube, with the curve more pronounced than the Sklar that we mentioned earlier. This curve extends through the seat tube and into the seat stays. It's absolutely beautiful.
You know, I'm right with you, Hottie. I love the beautiful sort of almost organic curve of a curved top tube. It just gives a bike sort of a nostalgic, beautiful, amazing look. And really, all 23 of the bikes were just gorgeous. And they all, of course, featured Envy bars, stems, and wheels. And this is no accident. Custom builders really love to build around Envy products because A, they're good, and B, Envy is a supporter of small independent builders, and C, Envy gear just looks great. The Envy Carbon Black goes with everything. And of course, they have decals so you can add accents that are going to go with whatever color scheme you make.
Yeah, it adds without distracting, that's for sure. So the Envy stuff looks great on any custom-built bike. You can check out the entire builder collection on the Envy website, along with Envy's wheels and components at Envy, that's enve.com, and let us know what your favorite bike is in that Builders Roundup.
Now, back to Coach Brian, who is going to help us reset our calendar in anticipation of some kind of competition in the near future.
We've been kind of stuck in this racing purgatory right now with nothing going on, right? But there's a chance, Brian, that the fall could open up or the early winter, and we might see some racing happening then. Now, when the pandemic hit, a lot of us were probably just finishing up our endurance-based training or getting close to it. So tell us, what happened to that training? Is that training still with us? Can we rely on it as we move forward into maybe some fall races or early winter races? What do we need to be thinking about as far as that's concerned?
That's a really personal, or the answer to that is a really personal answer for each athlete. We always try to look at that as an individual thing. But Hottie, the thing that I think about for people in this situation is simply that I want our athletes to, I want them to be able to get some racing in and enjoy the process, because whatever the fall looks like, it's going to look different. And so we kind of need to test the waters and find out where we're at. There are going to be people, how do I want to articulate it for you guys? But when I look at it, like, there's people right now that never let off the throttle, right? They were just like, hey, this is great. I'm now working from home. I'm training more than ever. I'm fitter than ever. I'm ready. Let's go to the dance, right? Like, it's like you're a high school kid and you're like, man, I'm ready for prom. Like, I've been practicing my waltz. Maybe the kids don't waltz these days, but that's like one kind of bucket of people, shall we say. There's people that are like super ready, like, just point me in the direction and I'm game, right? Then there's the people that were like, hey, I just didn't want to coach. I didn't want to train. I didn't want to do whatever, but I just kept riding. So I did a lot of easy riding. So then I got this maybe extended base period of fitness. Okay. They're going to need some race specificity. And so, we've already seen that here in Southern California, where there's been a couple of mountain bike races, and we had a couple of endurance mountain bike races. Rather, I should say we've had one. It was the Team Big Bear race up in Snow Summit, and we're getting ready for the second one here in a couple of weeks. But that for my athletes that were doing that endurance race, I just really cautioned them, because it was the first time they'd been to altitude, and it was the first time they'd been to altitude to race. And as you guys know, 7,000 feet is not 10,000 feet for Leadville. So it's like, that's a big kick in the gut. and your heart rate goes immediately sky high and your power is down in the basement. And if you just stare at your power meter, like, you're not going to have any fun. So what I told my guys is like, look, take the power and heart rate off of your bike. I don't care. Like, just put it in your pocket, do whatever. Just look at miles per hour and time so that you know when to eat and drink. And just go out there, race your bike, be in the moment, and try to use all of your experience so that you can kind of treat the race like hard, harder, hardest. It's like a play. There's like a development of characters, got a little crescendo going on, and we finish strong, something like that. Right. So it's like, I wanted people to feel the race more rather than just be staring at the data, because they haven't had that couple of races to kind of get that sharp end built. Right. So if you're in that category and you're listening here and you're like, man, I've been riding a lot, but I haven't done any intervals. I haven't done any of that stuff because I just haven't wanted to think about it. That person, when they get into events, you just got to be a little more patient with yourself. Don't think of yourself like you're just ready to, like, oh, hey, I've been training a lot, so I should be good. It's like, no. You're missing a critical component. We don't have the turbocharger on yet, but so just don't go flooring it. Let's be patient. And then there's the people that really lost a lot of motivation. And I'll give you an example for some of our athletes. They're heads of their businesses. They're not just heads of their household, but they're heads of their household and heads of their business. And they were confronted with, I got to get PPP money. I've got to figure out how to keep this place afloat. And everything dropped back to, maybe they were doing 12 to 15 hours a week because they were kind of had the business on autopilot. And now it's like they had to just all hands on deck to keep the business afloat. And so they really dropped back their stuff. So if you're in that third bucket of people where you're feeling undertrained and you're looking at events coming up, use those as opportunities to build. But again, be patient with yourself. You don't have a turbocharger. You may not have the base fitness that you really want, but hopefully you've been doing some Zwift racing or something to be able to keep that intensity in your repertoire a little bit, even if you're training less, and you're just maybe lacking that depth to be able to go in to do a 50-mile mountain bike race or whatever the goal event is, But I think people really need to take a look at themselves and just give an honest evaluation of where they're at and say, okay, am I like truly ready and I'm just missing that high end? Hey man, swing for the fence. Don't let me be the one to stop you. Like, swing for the fence and see how it goes. But if you feel you're underprepared, evaluate the way you're underprepared and see how you can race such that it can help contribute to building that back into your fitness. So I would really encourage people is, when it's safe, when it's appropriate, as it fits with, an old school road thing was racing our way into shape. It's not a bad thing to rely on as a mountain biker either, but you have to recognize that your shape isn't the same, and it's okay. You just don't be going out there thinking you're Babe Ruth, still the minor leagues. Let's chill out. You know what I mean? In a couple of months, you can ride like your Babe Ruth. Right now, let's go for a base hit. You know what I mean?
I have Babe Ruth's build, so that's something. So one thing that I wanted to ask you is, I mean, it sounds almost like you've been describing me, right? I've got a ton of base in this year. I've been riding my bike a ton, having a lot of fun, not worrying about racing. I know that, or I should say, I hope that for 2021, I will be lining up for the Leadville 100. For someone like me who doesn't have a coach, but who would like to, having missed a year, really tune myself up, if I were going to hire a coach, when would I need to find one and start training in earnest so that, by August, I'm in good to go shape, in the best shape of my life?
I think that's relative to your goals, Fatty, because if you want to be in the best shape of your life, you don't want to show up to Leadville and think, man, what could I have done with 6 more weeks of training? What could I have done with 6 more weeks of preparation? I have a guy, I'll give you an example. There's a guy that I coach who we trained for a year and a half to get ready for the Cape Epic. And he flew all the way there and they canceled it the day before the race. He pre-rode the stage. I mean, like, we had done so much work. And then he got over there and they canceled it the day before. So the question is, he came home and obviously it's like there's major trauma, right? I mean, this guy, what am I going to do now, right? I've been training for this for a year and a half. Like, there's all that grief process that so many of us had to go through that. I'm not so sure that everyone really understands how challenging that is. I did a great interview with Carrie Cheadle, who's a certified mental skills coach and just an amazing, amazing woman, great author. And I've read all her books. But she was talking about how this period of time mirrors what athletes that have major injuries go through, because you have to go through this kind of like recalibration of yourself and this, that, the other, right? You have to kind of deal with the grief of loss and all these things. But I think for a lot of people, you know, you've lost that. So now what, right? You got to kind of recalibrate yourself. So if you want to be in the best shape of your life, I would say sooner rather than later, contact somebody. And I would really encourage someone who's looking for a first-time coach, interview a couple of people, find someone that you want to build a relationship with, that you think like, hey, I like this guy or gal. They seem like they fit for me. Because I really believe most of our athletes we've coached for multiples of years because we have a very strong bond with them. They don't just stay just for a singular event. And that's because we build a relationship with them as we're really trying to help them be successful in all aspects of their life and not just cycling. But cycling is really a great way for people to get that. So what I would say is don't delay. Do it sooner rather than later, especially if we're going to go back to the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Take a look at yourself, figure out what you can do, right? Who doesn't, if you have enough base fitness, fantastic, brother, fantastic. Like, you've done so much good homework, dude, double high five. Let's get into some of the other things to make you the best well-rounded athlete you can. You know, remember, what was that Hottie, what was that movie where there was the Oakland A's? It was like Moneyball. That's what it is.
Moneyball,
right?
yeah.
Moneyball, right? And they talked about being a 5-tool player, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we talk about that enough as cyclists, right? Like, it's always like everyone wants to be a specialist. Like, yeah, I'm a sprinter. Yeah, I'm a climber. Yeah, I'm this, I'm that, right? And it's like, no. You don't have the luxury. If you're going to do the Leadville 100, you don't have the luxury of specializing. You have to be good at everything. You have to know nutrition. You have to know hydration. You have to know tire pressure. You have to know tire. You can't just have tires for, hard pack. You've got to be able to descend, hit the rocks, do the sand, do everything. You've got to do it all. You've got to be able to climb at altitude. You've got to be able to ride when it's hot. You've got to be able to ride when it's cold. You've got to be able to deal with the wind. If you're doing Leadville, you do not have a chance to specialize. So who doesn't want to be more prepared and have seen more and have more experience under their belt when they go to that kind of event? So again, I'm not trying to scare anybody or anything, but if you're truly, your goal is to be the best you can be, I don't think there's any better day to start than today. But if you're like, hey, I've done this before and I'm just going to kind of like get myself into shape, and then I'll just rely on a kind of a structured program for like that last little tweaking, that works too. There's nothing wrong with that. Remember, the whole purpose of coaching is to serve the athlete. It's not about the coach. It's about the athlete and helping them get a great experience. So that's totally fine too. I'm not suggesting that every one of your listeners should run out today and get a coach, but I am suggesting that I want them to have a real solid understanding of what it's going to take for them to be their very, very best. And I think for me, I have a coach, right? I've had a coach since I was racing with Hottie. And I still to this day have a coach. And the idea is because I believe that having a performance team is really important. I would never do my own taxes for my business because I was trying to save a few bucks. I want the best CPA possible to make sure I'm doing everything right? I want the best mechanic for my car. I want the best, all that stuff. So I always look at it, coaching, like it's part of a performance team, right? Like I don't have the time to wait. I want to be able to have somebody help me find the answers as quickly as possible so I can learn the lessons, retain that experience or retain that wisdom, and get moving forward and be successful.
Brian, as you know from coaching Leadville athletes, I mean, we tend to hyper-focus on that event and that event only. Like, that is our thing. That's what we're all about. Yeah, we may go do a qualifier to help us improve our corral position, but it's the qualifier and it's Leadville or nothing. It sounds like you would encourage racers, Leadville racers in particular, to expand their horizons a little bit in their run-up to the Leadville 100. Absolutely,
Hottie. I would. And again, maybe this is just the old roadie in me, where we used to race our way into shape, and I get it that things are a little different now because obviously with Zwift racing and the trainers that we have now, like you can really replicate some pretty incredible stuff. I mean, obviously you can what is it, Ruby, that you can, make the specific route. So like we could chop up the Leadville route into, okay, you're going to do power line, you're going to do pipeline, you're going to do this. Like we could chop all that up and you could put that into your weekly training program very, very easily, right? But I would encourage everybody, I like to think about this, like if you were a ballerina, perfection is the only option on performance day, right? If anyone who loves watching the Olympics, what you're watching is the performance of that athlete. And the way that these other sports do it is there's just repetition until it's just ingrained in your body to do those things. It's pattern. The physical therapists talk about it a lot. They talk about patterns of movement for our bodies, right? Both healthy and non-healthy, right? And what I would say is, by going to the races, there's a pattern that you develop. You know what to eat for breakfast, when you need to eat it relative to your start time. You know what you really like for a warm-up, because that changes based on how much training load you have. If you have a lot of training load, you do a little less warm-up, or maybe you do a longer, easy warm-up. Maybe you just got to bring your trainer and bust out a really short, sharp workout with some intensity. I used to coach a guy, and before his endurance mountain bike races, he had a Toyota Tacoma, and it had a plug-in in it. And so he would bring his Wahoo kicker and put it in the back of his truck and plug it in with the car started so that he could do his perfect warm-up, because we knew what warm-up had made it happen for him. And there was no places to warm up. This guy was in Ohio at the time. So, I mean, like, you can go as crazy with it as you want, but there's all of these things that you can do by going to events. There's things that you learn. That doesn't mean you have to race flat out every time and just race for the win and finish with the tongue hanging in the spokes. But there is something that you learn by racing your bicycle. You learn about pacing. You can learn about racing at altitude. You can learn about dehydration. You can learn about how to ride through cramps. You can learn about all these things. And I think as a coach, I can prep people till they're blue in the face and talk to them about, hey, in this situation, do this, in this situation, do this, in this situation, do this. But nothing replaces doing it yourself. Most of the people who are listening to this podcast are kinesthetic learners. What does that mean? You learn by doing, right? Humans, our brains are built like we learn by failure, right? When we fail, that's like the best learning we can do. Well, if you're only doing one event a year, you're putting a lot on it to be successful, right? Whereas if you could have done some little races and learned a bunch of lessons that really were inconsequential at the time, leading up to Leadville, and then you get to Leadville and you're like, man, I have made all the mistakes. Guess what? You know what not to do on race day, right? Like you're like, oh, I'm starting to feel a little gut bomb coming. Boom, you hit a Coke or whatever you do at the next aid station. You know how to combat that, and you keep your legs going. Oh, I feel like maybe a little cramp is coming on. Hey, I'm going to knock it back a peg on this climb. I'm going to eat something solid. I'm going to get back into it. Those are things you just can't. I can't pedal the bike with my athletes, and I can't be the little birdie on their shoulder that's like, hey, bro, soften it up a kick, or hey, ask that guy for a pull, or I can't do that for my athletes. So the only way that I can help them is let's go to some events, let's talk through preparing for the event, and then let's debrief from the event what went well, what didn't. Let's get rid of what didn't and improve it, and let's keep what did. And so that's where I would encourage people to do some training races, if you will, just so that they can go through the motions, find what works for them, get rid of what doesn't, and keep moving forward. So that when you get to Leadville, it's like you get up in the morning, you know that oatmeal with apples is what you do. You eat your oatmeal with apples, you take care of your business, you get on the start line, you put on the chamois butter that you always use, you put on your PR lotion because you've used it 74 times, you're good to go, and then you get ready to ride. As opposed to, I've never used PR lotion before, or I got this new special kind of chamois butter that's supposed to be extra long lasting. It's like, no, it's not the day to use it. Like, oh, hey, I got Coca-Cola gels today. No new flavors. No new flavors. It's Leadville. It's not new flavor day. It's Leadville day. Like, no new flavors, guys. You know? And so that's where I would
No new anything on Leadville day. Yeah. No, we're absolutely simpatico on that. That's been one of the things that we have repeated. I don't know how many hundreds of times. We don't try anything new on race day.
Especially with food. Food is a recurring theme on the show, and there are countless stories of people fouling up the nutrition because, again, I mean, you figure that stuff out during practice. Practice, whether it be training or, more importantly, like Brian's pointing out, Fatty, I mean, practice races. My best years on the bike, Leadville especially, were the years I not only raced Leadville, maybe a qualifier, but also some local XC races or some local mountain bike endurance races or Belgian waffle ride or gravel races. I combined those, figured out, did all my diagnosing there. You get to Leadville, which is your big day. That's your Boston Marathon. That's your Ironman. Leadville is it. It's all about this. It's all about this day. And everything's figured out. Everything is ready to go. You just got to go out there and pedal that thing.
Yeah, got to practice everything, including races.
Oh, absolutely, guys. And the only thing I would say, too, is think about it for our listeners here. Like, if I go out as a coach and I'm like, okay, man, I want you to do, and this is what I did with one of my guys who was training for Dirty Kansas, who did Dirty Kansas and then did Leadville that year. So this guy, had to build these massive miles, and we had to do it in 1 day sections. And so it's like, he never done this 200 miles before. So we were like, like one of his rides was to do 10-hour ride. Try going out and doing a 10-hour ride by yourself. And this particular guy I'm talking about, he lived in Las Vegas. You know how is the riding in Las Vegas by yourself? Like, who's going to do that? If I say, hey, go do that, like the compliance on that is going to be very, very minimal. It's very difficult. But if you say, hey, dude, if you sign up for the Belgian waffle ride, you get a 10-hour bike ride for $250 and you don't have to worry about any of your support, everyone will do it. You know what I mean? And there's no pressure to perform. Anything you get out of the event is just nothing but bonus. So I'm not suggesting you just, overlay your year with just endless events because now you don't have to train anymore. I'm saying strategically placed, a lot of these events can help feed the bigger goal, right? And whether that's on a gravel bike or on a road bike, or just like Hadi said, there's a lot to be said about XC racing, because the reality is, the guys that are darn good, the guys and gals that are darn good, they're basically taking their XC race pace and then they're doing it at endurance race up to 50-mile pace. You know what I mean? Like, they're hauling the mail. They are going so fast. I mean, you guys see the Leadville times. I mean, they're just incredible, right? And that's the evolution. It's because everyone's been practicing. Now all of a sudden, to get into that front echelon at Leadville, you can't just say, I'm just going to do Leadville. Like, you have to do all the other things that gives you those layers so that you know what XC race pace is, and you know what it's like to go flat out for the first 45 minutes and you don't fall apart 6 hours later. Those are trainable things, but it takes a long time to get those adaptations.
Brian, we're going to have you cap your 2018 Belgian waffle ride story for us, but I do have one more training question for you, and that concerns metrics and data. Now, we actually had somebody on the show, Sarah Sturm, a terrific racer. She finished second at Leadville last year. She, for years, trained with no heart rate monitor, no power, no nothing. Just went out there and did it by feel. And part of me loves that. But the reality is a lot of us folks are now, and including any rider, a lot of riders there on Training Peaks, are using power meters and heart rate monitors and other devices to help them track their fitness as an endurance cyclist. So what would you say are the one or two most important metrics for endurance racers?
Ooh. I think all of them are very useful, and let's get into some of my favorites. But I want everyone to know that everything exists on a scale of usefulness, right? Like, it's useful to a point, right? Like, the first metric I would talk about is chronic training load, and that's a 42-day average of all of your training stress scores compiled and then averaged. And so that, I'm sure everybody listening either knows about that or can do a quick Google search on CTL. But chronic training load is a really, really good metric because it gives you an idea of what kind of training volume you've been doing and what you can handle. You kind of think of it as most people cyclists can handle about 4 times the daily TSS of whatever their CTL is. And that's a pretty broad strokes generalization. But if your CTL is 50, then, you can do a 200. Well, if you do, 50 TSS points an hour, that ain't going to get you through Leadville, so you got to look at it from that standpoint. You got to look at what it takes to get through that event, and then you can backwork it. I think CTL is really, really useful from that standpoint, because it can also help you discuss like, well, how, if you're an 85 CTL kind of bike rider and you're going to go to Leadville, that's a very different thing than if you're a 120 CTL kind of bike rider. You can do things differently, and you can take chances, push the pace at certain places and this, that, the other. And you just got to know whether you got to be conservative or not, and CTL can help do that. So that's very, very useful. On a micro level, I really like intensity factor. That's just for me personally as a coach. I really like intensity factor, and intensity factor is it's a measure of the overall ride as it relates to your threshold. So it's usually normalized power divided by threshold power. And so it gives you an idea of how intense the ride was. And so you can use that on a daily basis to kind of go, okay, how easy can an easy ride be? Because most people's easy rides are in the 0.7 range, and that's not easy enough, right? Especially if we're talking about truly building an aerobic base, it really needs to be, 0.62 or less, somewhere around there. It just needs to be super easy. And most people don't ride easy enough. And specifically if they're type A driven, hardworking people like are listening to this podcast, all of you listening, I know you're out there getting after it, trying hard. You're super motivated. You're listening to this during pandemic. I know you want to get after it. That's fantastic, but you still need easy rides. Okay. And I don't mean like, well, I only broke a little bit of a sweat, because you know what I mean? Like, you got to get something out of this workout. It's like, no. We use intensity factor as coaches to really, really help our athletes to teach them, to help them learn like how easy can be. Because most people are like, well, what's the point in being out here? And it's like, well, guys, active recovery is exactly that. It's the minimum amount of movement necessary to create the, recovery response. Like the minimum amount. It's not, most people are so much like, well, here's the training zone. I want to be at the upper end. How about we look for the lower end sometimes? Because there are workouts where we want to be on the low end, specifically recovery days. So I would say intensity factor is really good for people on a micro level. Normalized power is also a good metric, because it just gives you an idea of how hard a ride is, right? But I think something that is useful for people to do, specifically since we're talking about Leadville, is looking at the difference between normalized power and average power. Okay, if you really want to build, this is just kind of an old roadie trick, but if you really want to like build really good, robust power, neuromuscular power, you really want to get your average power and your normalized power to be as close as possible on a ride, and that's going to be kind of a pure endurance ride. Whereas most people, if you look at their training files, they have like a really high NP and a low average power, and that means they coast a lot, right? And if you're coasting a lot, you're missing valuable training time. Now I get it. It's, depending on your terrain, depending on how much dirt you're doing and all those things, that's, coasting is inevitable. But if you're using, say, a road bike to train on, that difference between normalized power and average power can be very, very useful. So getting those narrowed down together helps you build a lot of neuromuscular strength and like just ton of quality built into a single workout. Like most people, just try and go do 200 watts and try and have your normalized power at 200 watts. Sounds really low, but try and do that for 2 hours, and you might be surprised at how challenging, how wiped out you are in that workout. So those are three metrics, but at the end of the day, there's so much good stuff on Training Peaks. I mean, they just have I love Training Peaks. They do a lot of great stuff. So, we can keep talking about each athlete until, like I said, Leadville, you got to be able to do it all. So I think all the metrics are pretty useful from that standpoint.
Yeah. Well, you left us hanging at the beginning of this interview, 2018 Belgian waffle ride. So let's circle back to that. You got away off the front somehow. You didn't know how. And what happened? Some big story happened here.
Yeah. Well, spoiler alert, I won the bike race, but it's worth sharing with you, because it's kind of, I hope that everyone can have a good chuckle at my expense, because, I think everyone in bike racing, you get so drilled in and so focused that you kind of like the most logical thing. Someone can say something like the sky is blue and you're like, nope, it's purple. And that happens to the best of us, and certainly happened to me that day. But long story short is we were going into one of the not final dirt section. We were probably about 80 miles in, 90 miles in, somewhere around there. And we were going through the Hodges dirt section. And it was myself, Colin Strickland, and Ted King, a teammate of mine, Ulysses Castillo. And he wasn't my teammate that year, but we are now teammates. But anyway, a couple other guys. There's probably like 8 of us or something like that. And Colin was leading into that section. And I gave him a little bit of a gap because Colin was on a gravel bike and I was just on a road bike. And I didn't want to be right on his tail because I want to be able to pick a good line if he takes a bad line or something, or make a pass because there's really rocky sections. So I was behind him and he looked under his shoulder and he thought he was dropping me, and because I had 6 guys on my wheel, he thought, oh, I'm getting the gap. I'm dropping everybody. So he flies through this section and we come up on this like hike-a-bike section essentially. And I know about it. So I start trying to dismount and he runs into it and just wads it up. Right. And then because I'm right on him, I'm dismounting and I get kind of tangled up on him. And so what happens is Ted King and Brian, what was Brian? It's not Brian Larson, Brian. Oh darn it, he rides for Giant now. But anyway, super nice guy. He used to race.
Brian Lewis.
Anyway, Brian Lewis. Thank you so much. Yep. It was Mr. Lewis. So Brian Lewis, all those guys, him, Ted, and Ule go up the road, and I'm just like, oh, that's the race, and I'm just so mad. And Colin was like super graceful, and we helped each other up, and we get going. And now these guys we're kind of weaving through this like single track section, and I'm just fired up. I'm like, I did not come here to like get 6th. Like, I'm getting on the podium and I'm going to ride till I die. And so I'm riding as hard as I can through this dirt section, which was really not all that smart on the road bike that I was riding because it's very, very rocky. And we kind of pop out into a parking lot there, and then you jump back into the dirt. And when we got back into the dirt, I couldn't see the guys. And there was like, you could see a K of gravel in front of me. And it's just this kind of old dirt road as you go, what is the reverse of Lemon Twistenberg. And I freaked out. So I go into that section and Colin's like right on my wheel. And I look at Colin, I'm like, bro, they're gone. We got to roll. Like, let's get it on, bro. Like, we have to be all in. We're going to be skating tires around these corners. Like, you ready? Like, let's clock in and get it on. And he starts cramping. And so I like have this decision to make where I'm like, oh my God, like, Colin's a motor. This is before he won DK, but everyone knows Colin's a motor. So I'm like, dude, I can't go by myself and catch Ted King and Brian Lewis and Ule. I can't catch these guys, but it's now or never. And so he starts cramping. I floor it. And I'm just railing as hard as I can across this. And it's like probably another 5 to 8K of gravel. And we're just smashing. I'm smashing. I can't see Colin, and I come out onto the road, and you come out onto Del Dios Highway, and it's a freaking headwind. And I don't see those guys. at all. And I'm like, bro, I'm just losing so much time. I'm just like so mad. And this is where I hope your listeners will get a kick out of it. As I pull up, I get out on the road, and literally there's 2 highway patrolmen, okay? 2 highway patrolmen on motorcycles, and then a SRAM neutral car, and then Michael Marks from BWR is riding passenger in this car that has like, there's a video car, they're like taking video. And I'm like, damn, BWR is freaking big time. Like, I'm 4th on the road, and like, I got this, like, this is big time. Like, wow, I'm pretty impressed. But like MMX like rolls down his window to say something to me. And because I'm mostly a knucklehead, like I just like, before he can even get something out to say something, I'm like, I don't care what's going to happen. I'm going to ride into, they're going to drop somebody. And I'm going to ride my way into the podium, bro. I'm not going to let you down. Like, I'm going to handle it, bro. I will just ride till I'm dead. What he was going to tell me was like, dude, you're in the lead and everyone's like way back, bro. Like, that's what he was going to tell me, but I didn't give him the chance to say it. I think I'm in 4th place now, and I just lay the hammer down, and I'm going as hard as I can. And if you guys know me well enough by now to know I'm not a time trialist, right? Like, I can ride the front pretty good, but I'm still no time trialist. So I'm a little bit of a, I'm a short guy. I'm a little bit of a bowling ball. The guys are always like, dude, you look like a bulldog on a bicycle. Get those elbows in. So they're always making fun of me. Anyway, I digress. But so I rode an hour and a half solo, and, I always try to make time. I was trying to think sportsmanship is important. So I'm passing the people that are doing the wafer ride, and I'm like, trying to give them thumbs up, but stay aero, stay in the drops. Like, I passed this one guy, if you know anything about BWR, it's pretty legendary. There's a guy who's done it every year on a pedigo. Do you guys know what a pedigo is?
I've seen him there. Yeah. I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. He leaves like at, bro, he leaves like at 4 a.m. or something like that. Like, but he's done the whole distance on a pedigo. So I pass this guy and I know that, like, dude, that's the dude. You know what I mean? And he's like, oh my God, here comes the race leader. But I don't think I'm the race leader. So I'm like, bro, good job. You know what I mean? Just keep hammering down the road or whatever. And eventually the police motorcycle goes to change out. And this guy who was just riding next to me, like, he never talked to me or anything like that. He don't know. He's just on overtime, just cruising, like enjoying that we're rolling, This big fat dude on this rad Harley, police bike pulls up to me and he's like, hey, this is after like an hour and 15 minutes just off the front, just drilling myself. And I'm going as hard as I can, And he's like, hey, you the leader of the race? And I'm like, no, bro, I'm fourth. And he's like, no, dude, you're leading. And I was like, whatever, bro. Like, just like this guy, like, we're having this conversation, And I still didn't believe this guy. But that's when it started to click, is like, oh, wait, I might be leading this thing, And so I came out of the final, not the final dirt section, but what they have is, it's not the Mirage. What do they call it? The Oasis. That's like kind of the final one there, where there's like people like slapping you with hand paint and whatever and whatnot, bacon and such. So I just ran through there as fast as I could. And I come out of there, and Victor Sheldon is riding the motorcycle. And if you guys know who Victor Sheldon is, he's just an absolute legend, like multi-time national mountain bike champion. He's riding the motorcycle, laid out the course, whatever. And I've known him for years. And he comes up to me and he's all, okay, McCulloch, I think you can win. You've been holding them they started at a minute and a half on you an hour and a half ago. And like, they're still pretty far back, but Ted's probably going to drop everybody on the climb and he's going to come across, but you can still win this thing. And I was like, what? Like, what? He's like, yeah. Ted's probably going to try and come across to you on the climb. You got to go everything. He's like, you got to go everything on this climb. Right. And I was buckled, guys, just buckled, because I'd been all in for an hour and a half and I hadn't seen anybody. I'm thinking I'm trying to catch one of these guys to get dropped, And so you go up the famous double peak climb, which is 14%, and it's just stupid hard. It's so hard. And so, as I've told you, I'm not a very good climber, and so I just like try to empty the tank to the top, and I go as hard as I can. I'm first one to the top, and at the top I have 11 seconds on Ted. So he brought back quite a lot. Obviously he's Ted King. He's a total stud. And so I fly down the descent, and then you get on this dirt section, which is all off camber dirt, sketch, just like kitty litter on hard pack. And I'm riding a road bike on rim brakes. Like, it just is like, I am like full butt pucker, just trying to work this thing around the corner. And, Ted's on, 38s and super rad, gravel bike. So he just rails up on me in the dirt. And I'm like, I had this moment, guys, where I'm just honest. Like, I was feeling very, very sorry for myself. Very sorry for myself. I thought, man, the race is over. Like, how are you going to beat Ted King? Like, dude, he's the king of gravel. He's the dude, man. He's like done the Tour de France. Like, I'm just a little goofball domestic pro, that gets on the front for my guys when they're in the yellow jersey. You know what I mean? And so long story short, we had about 10 miles left, and he and I are rotating. And he tries to attack me a couple times on the climbs, and I answered every time. And I was like, man, I don't know. Like, I might be able to do this. And then I know the finish. And if there's one thing I know about crit racing, if you ain't first, you're last. You win in doubt, lead it out. Like, you got to go into the turns first. And so I was like, okay, like, going into the turn, it's turn, finish. So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to go all in with 100 meters to that turn and be sprinting into the turn, out of the turn. And then it's very unlikely that anyone's going to come by me. And if I lose it, at least I gave myself the chance to win, And that's what we did. So, I ended up beating him by whatever, half a second or something like that. And it was like, yeah, it was pretty incredible day. I didn't really think, I could win something like that. And, it was a ton of fun. And I was just like, it was cool because like so many people, our local friends were there. And I know the guy, Sam Ames, who puts on he makes all the waffles, and like, I know the race announcer there. And it was just like, I was like, boys, we did it. I really felt like we'd all kind of come together. A lot of people have helped me over the years and helped believe in me. And I was just very thankful for that, because it was it was just a super cool experience. So I can't recommend that event enough. And I really can't recommend endurance events as a whole, because I think you find something else, you find something special in yourself out there. And if my experience is indicative of anybody else's, I think Leadville is the same thing. You find something more within yourself, and then all of a sudden you kind of come out of that. It's like crucible. These ultra endurance events are exactly that. They're a crucible where you can find more in yourself and do some really cool stuff. So I hope that everyone listening can enjoy that story, but also, find that kind of experience. And you don't have to win to have that kind of experience, but you sure can find something special in yourself at Leadville. That's for sure.
What a great story.
Well, Fatty, give him his official invite then. Invite him to Leadville. I think he belongs there.
Oh, do I have that power? Hey, you're invited to Leadville. Come on over, Brian. We'll have a hottie crew for us. It'll be fantastic.
We'll go into the dark side. No problem.
Brian, thanks so much for coming on the show, man. It's been a pleasure catching up with you and getting some great tips about, how we're going to approach what has certainly been an uncertain season, but hopefully some normalcy as we move forward.
Oh, absolutely. You're so welcome. And I hope your listeners, I hope they got something from this. If they have any questions, they're always welcome to hit us up either on our social media channels or through Big Wheel Coaching for sure. But, Fatty, I want to thank you for your time. Hottie, I think the world of you. Both you guys, I know you guys, I love that you guys want to help people get better. And I think that's so important for us to build our network, to help people, to share that tribal knowledge of doing these crazy ultra endurance events. You guys have this incredible platform, and I feel I'm just humbled to have been here and share the little bit that I have to share with everybody. And I want you guys to keep doing that good work and helping people crush Leadville.
If you need a coach, and Fatty, I think we can both strongly endorse Brian in this case, you can find him, that is Brian McCulloch, at bigwheelcoaching.com. And ladies, if you'd prefer to work with a woman, or guys, if you'd prefer to work with a woman, Brian's wife, Joy, is also part of the Big Wheel Coaching team. Joy is also a road pro, but she started with mountain bikes, racing the Norba series. Brian and Joy also have a podcast, the Big Wheel Coaching Podcast, so give that a listen.
Yep. And with that said, let's wrap up Season 3, Episode 21 of the Leadville Podcast, presented by Floyd's of Leadville. If you love the show, give us a 5-star rating and review over at Apple Podcasts. Please share it with your cycling friends and support our sponsors. Let them know you like the way they make this show possible.
Meanwhile, if you have ideas or questions for us, head over to the Leadville100podcast.com comment section and get in touch. That's also where you can find a link to our Slack workspace and jump into our never-ending Leadville conversation.
And you can follow me on Twitter. I am at Fat Cyclist. Hottie is at Michael Houghton. And you can find us both over on Facebook in the Leadville 100 MTB Participants Group. Everyone, good luck in your training. Thanks so much for listening. And we'll see you at the 2021 starting line.